In this video, I'll give you the best running back to target in the second round of 2024 fantasy drafts. I'm Jim Coventry of RotoWire. Let's start out with Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. There are going to be some drafts where Taylor does get grabbed in the first round, but usually he will fall into the second. So for that sake, we'll make that disclaimer. Now, Jonathan Taylor's in an interesting situation here. In 2023, Taylor had a career low yards per carry. Yet he still had strong broken tackle rate, 71st percentile, yards after contact, 84th percentile. So the underlying numbers were fine. Remember that last year, Taylor had a 2022 ankle injury that lasted into 2023, put him on the PUP list for 4 games, so he missed that time. And then he was eased back in the lineup. And actually, Taylor only had 40 snaps 5 times, and he didn't see 50 snaps in any game. So realistically, it was a very weird season for Taylor. Zach Moss is gone. Zach Moss was getting work. Taylor's healthy offseason. That's a big deal. Now, Taylor's missed 13 games in the last 2 years, and I know he had a late season injury last year, but many of the missed games were due to the same ankle injury that spilled over from 2022 to 2023. So to call him injury prone based on that is a little bit of a stretch. Could it be true? Yes, but I think that you can't put too much stock into one injury that costs parts of 2 years. So there's that. Now, that said, I want to point this out. Jonathan Taylor has not played with Anthony Richardson. That's important, because we are going to see this opportunity change. The offensive line of the Colts is good at run blocking, very useful, and it will remain that way. They run 3 receiver sets, so the amount of stacked boxes could be favorable. Anthony Richardson's important. Anthony Richardson obviously is a uber mobile quarterback. Now, durability is an issue. Anthony Richardson played 4 games last year. He had injuries in 3 of them. So if Richardson plays, those RPO looks, I talk about this frequently, get that RPO quarterback on the move. All of a sudden, linebackers are on their heels, not their toes, because they aren't sure where this is going. Is it a quarterback run? Is it a running back run? Is it a pull it back and pass? They have to be very hesitant. Even if it's for a nanosecond, when you give an elite running back like Taylor a nanosecond with defenders on their heels, this is where a superstar running back can really take advantage. You want to flash back to 2012, Robert Griffin Jr. was a quarterback doing the RPO thing under Kyle Shanahan in Washington, and we had Alfred Morris at running back. And we saw Alfred Morris, one of the first running backs, to super capitalize on those RPOs in this recent era. It's over 10 years, I get it, but for reference, Jonathan Taylor should have similar benefits here. So we already seen Taylor be able to put up incredible yardage totals in one season, but don't think for a moment that it can't happen again in this current situation. Saquon Barkley's next. Now, Barkley had injury concerns earlier in his career. Between 2019 and 2021, he missed 21 games. That was a problem. But in the last 2 years, Barkley's been mostly healthy, missed 4 games, and he's averaged 320 touches. So we have seen him with big workload, a lot of defensive attention looking at him, and yet durability's been decent. Of course, running backs are going to miss sometime. I don't think we're going to see too many running backs come out and play all 17 games. A couple will, but it's going to be rare. So if he misses a couple games, that really is baked into things, right? Now, Barkley was in a terrible situation with the Giants. And actually, the stacked box rate wasn't terrible. But realistically, defenses knew that they could just send people, even in a light box, just send people down, because there was no respect to the quarterback. There was no respect to the receiving game. Barkley was the only weapon they really had to worry about. So, and also add in, the Giants had one of the worst offensive lines in the last decade last year. So Barkley could not have had a worse scenario to deal with. Even when the Giants were trailing, Barkley was the only weapon that could hurt another team. So the approach was so focused on him, it wasn't going to change. Now Barkley's on the Eagles. Offensive line, they lose their center, Jason Kelsey. That's not optimal, but this line should still be way, way above average. The other thing is defenses. What do they have to worry about? Well, you got A.J. Brown, you got Devontae Smith, you got Dallas Goedert, you got Jalen Hurts. So Barkley goes from a situation where he was the mark. Well, he's not the mark anymore. If defenses go in looking to stop Barkley, they will get shredded by everybody else. So at worst, defenses play them neutral. At best, they worry about the pass like most teams, and Barkley has a lot of room to run. We have seen new offensive coordinator Kellen Moore when in Dallas a couple of years ago beyond. We've seen running backs get up to 20% of the targets. So it's possible Barkley's heavily involved as a receiver. Now, look, we could lose a lot of touchdown opportunities. Jalen Hurts is there. I don't know if the tush push was predicated on a combination of Kelsey and Hurts. It's possible it was, because Kelsey was so good at getting low and leveraging. And then, of course, we hear the great stories about the squat strength ability of Hurts. It was probably the combination of those. If the tush push does not result in the same effectiveness without Kelsey, there may be more touchdown opportunities than we think for Barkley. Important to know. Also, Jalen Hurts was banged up last year. So does the coaching staff think about it and say, you know what? We had a banged up quarterback last year. If we have Barkley, do we really need to put Hurts in a situation? And if the team thinks they can run the tush push, maybe, and again, I'm not predicting this, okay? But maybe they just say, you know what, Saquon, you'll take the snap and you'll do the tush push. It's possible that happens. It doesn't have to be Jalen Hurts if Barkley could do it in a similar fashion. So don't rule that out either. Again, I do think the touchdown numbers will be capped because of the Hurts factor, but it's, again, something to consider. The Eagles, they did make additions on defense. I still think down the spine of the defense, they're going to struggle. I think they're going to give up points. I think they're going to have to get in shootouts, and that's good for Barkley. And I think overall, the offense is going to have to score as many points as they can. I know we say that about every team. Of course, everybody wants to score points, but I think they're going to have to, and they have the firepower to do it. And I think the rising tide, in the past, the Eagles would play with leads. And when they played with leads, they were able to sit on the ball in the second half. We saw that 2 years, the Super Bowl year. We saw that a lot. I don't think that's going to be a big deal this year. So I think Barkley is going to continue to see nearly 300 touches. He's going to see passing game work. The touchdowns could be a little bit diminished because of Hurts, but I think Barkley is in a phenomenal situation. Hey, if you enjoy videos like this, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe to the RotoWire Fantasy Football channel on YouTube. Also, you can check out all of RotoWire's fantasy football content and rankings. You get a free 2-day trial, no credit card needed. You just head over to rotowire.com/Jim, and you can see all of our content. I have a bunch of articles up there, so I'd love if you check those out as well. All right, last player in this, I'm going to call it an ADP battle. Devon Achane of the Miami Dolphins. Achane, we remember. Now, first of all, remember, week 1, didn't play a lot, did like nothing. So my guess is fantasy managers mostly, unless you're in a real deep league, you probably had to sit him in week 2 because nobody was on bye. If you didn't have injuries, you probably sat Achane. And Achane had 51 PPR points. The next 2 games, he had a 27 and a 23. Still amazing. Still fantastic. During the 3-game stretch, we saw Achane average 12.6 yards per carry. He also had 8 catches for 63 yards. He had 7 touchdowns in those 3 games, a total of 500 scrimmage yards. It was insane. And then Achane missed time. Missed 5 of the next 6 games between week 6 and 12. So obviously wasn't around. He returns, seemingly healthy. The Dolphins' offense had been largely figured out by the league. They were struggling across the board. There were a lot of issues. In the last 7 games, including the NFL playoff game, Achane, 4.97 yards per carry, which is really good. But that's what Raheem Mostert runs for. So when people are looking at Achane, they see the season number of 7 yards per carry. Oh my goodness, how do I pass on that? Even if he gets limited work, you got to love that, right? And then they may remember the 12.6 yards per carry he had early in the season. Oh my gosh, I had to get shares of that. But it's possible that 4.97 per carry is more indicative of what we'll see. And he had 1 touchdown in the last 6 games. Those are fickle. Raheem Mostert was eating. That's all said. But Achane's 5'9", 188. It's very unlikely he's going to get a high volume role. Team drafted Jalen Wright. They do have other running backs on the roster. I don't think Mike McDaniel's going to overexpose Achane, especially when he missed 5 to 6 games in the middle of the season last year. So I think there's a committee backfield. I think that Achane, we had that wonderful explosion of 3 weeks, but I don't know that's a realistic picture. Can he have huge games? Of course he can. He's a dynamic player. But all that said, there's variables. And if you're going to tell me I'm going to spend a second-round pick, a premium second-round pick, on a player in a timeshare where he had a somewhat slow end of the season, I'm a little nervous about spending a draft pick that high. So here's my final verdict. I'm going with Saquon number 1. I just really believe that Eagles offense is going to have to score all the points they can. And even though the touchdown potential could be diminished, I just think Barkley across the board is in a phenomenal situation. Jonathan Taylor's a close second. If Anthony Richardson goes down, I think that RPO element goes away. I think the injuries could be a problem. Recently, it's been a problem for Taylor. So there's a little less in my mind certainty. There's no certainty in fantasy football, right? Achane's third, because Achane will see the least work of those three. And despite the great explosiveness, I don't know that he's any less productive than Barkley or Taylor given a heavier workload.